My name is Neil Malek. This is Everyday Office, and today's video is actually about Adobe Photoshop, specifically about a technique called an adjustment layer. So in Adobe Photoshop, oftentimes people know that they have access to it, but have absolutely no understanding of the different components that they have available to them. So as you can see, I've opened a photograph of a business setting, and it's very likely that you might be held responsible for doing things like embedding this into a newsletter or getting this ready for a website, things along those lines. And you don't just want the simple color photograph that you get straight off the camera. So one technique that's incredibly easy to do is something called an adjustment layer. And it allows us to apply many different ideas, many different themes to a photo in a non-destructive way. Here's what I mean by that. If I went to the top of my screen to the image menu, I could go down to something like adjustments, for example, and you'll see that in the adjustments menu, I've got things that could be useful, like being able to change the photo to a black and white photo, or being able to invert the colors, or being able to posterize the colors. But let's go to something like black and white, for example. If I click onto black and white, I can choose how that black and white is applied. Notice that the preview shows me that it is in fact changing it to black and white. But what I can do is I can say any red tones that you find in the photograph, either make them more white or more black. Any yellow tones that you find in the photo, turn them more white or more black. Notice that as I turn the yellow tones in the photo to more white, the little couch in the background there turns blinding white. As I turn it more black, that little couch in the background turns very dark. And so I can decide how this black and white effect is being produced. But then when I click OK, let's think about, what happens when we realize, oh, the couch is too dark or too light. Well, when I go over here to my layers palette on the right-hand side, you'll see all I've got is the background photo. That's all that I'm working with right here. And so if I don't like the way that the black and white was applied, I could go to my history menu and I could go back from where I changed it to black and white back to where I just opened the photo. But I can't go back to that black and white and just sort of tweak the setting, which is really what I wanted to do. So instead of using the image menu, what I like to do is I like to go to my layers palette on the right-hand side. And I like to go to the bottom of the layers palette where there looks like a black and white cookie down here, like a dipped cookie. When I click on that, this allows me to apply the same effects. You see black and white in here, you see color balance, you see invert and posterize, those options that I showed you from the image menu. But here, what we're going to be doing is applying those effects as a layer that sits on top of the photograph. So if I go to black and white, like I did a moment ago, you can see here the same adjustments that I can make. Let's take a look at that. There we go. Let's take a look at that couch in the background, right? And so in the exact same way that earlier I changed the yellow to a very white color, or I changed the yellow to a very black color, I can do that same thing with these sliders, and I get the same effect on that couch. And then, I sort of put this back over here. That's fine. And I've got my black and white setup. It almost looks identical to the way it was a few moments ago. But now, if somebody comes and says, the black and white just doesn't look right to me, you can go over to the layers panel and see that black and white is a separate layer unto itself right here sitting on top of the background. And in fact, if I just turn off this little eyeball over here on the side, see how the color comes back? And then I click the eyeball and black and white comes back. And I turn off the layer and the color comes back. And I turn the layer back on and the black and white comes back. So first of all, I can turn it on and off. But secondly, I can just go to this little indicator right here, the black and white dipped cookie, double click on it, and then the settings for how the black and white came to be pop right back up. And I can say, oh, I want that yellow couch to be a little bit darker. I can move that yellow slider down. And now when I collapse that, and I collapse this, see how the yellow couch became darker in the background? And so try that anytime that you want to change the way the color works in your image. Instead of going to the image menu and making certain adjustments to that photograph, go to the layers menu and add a new adjustment layer, because then that layer sits independent of the photograph itself, and you can turn it on and off, and you can tweak it and do other things to it that make it a rich functional part of how you're going to interact with these photos.